Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to join Master Talk from Design Wire. Today is a big day. Let's welcome our guest master, Bjarke Ingels from BIG.
Thank you. Ni hao.
So our Master Talk program is a serious program that aiming to the world-class masters. We had the talk with Peter Eisenman, Kengo Kuma, Thomas Heatherwick, and Winnie Mas from MVRDV and many other masters. And today we are very honored to have Bjarke Ingels join our talk. Let's welcome him again. Okay, so Bjarke, as the most famous architect now, we are very curious about the reason that why you chose the architecture as your profession. Can you share with us why you choose to be an architect?
Yes. I mean, of course, like now I personally find that architecture, the fact that we as human beings and as architects have the power to create the framework for our lives, to give form to our future, is the most exciting thing you can do. But when I was a kid, leaving high school, my dream was to become a cartoonist, to make graphic novels. And I think my luck was that there was no cartoon academy in Denmark. So the closest thing I could find was the Royal Danish Art Academy School of Architecture, where back then, 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, the first 2 years were dedicated to very much making your drawing skills better. And of course, you can imagine I was 18 years old. I spent the first 18 years of my life drawing, people and vehicles, helicopters and cars and animals and all kinds of moving things. So then I thought maybe I spent 2 years learning to be better at drawing the background. So the buildings and the landscapes where the action takes place. And then I slowly fell in love with the background and forgot about comic books and became an architect.
So by doing architecture for years, do you find out like which architect has the most influence on you, and what design styles has the most influence on you?
I mean, I think when I started studying architecture, I had no ideas about architecture. The only architect I knew by name was Jørgen Utzon, who was the architect of the Sydney Opera, and he is Danish and is a bit of a national hero in Denmark. He has sadly built very little. He's built almost nothing in Denmark. Like he's built one church and a few two housing projects and a villa and a few villas for himself. But then he did the Sydney Opera, and so I think he has this principle that he calls the additive, that he firmly believed that you could use prefabrication and industrial manufacturing to make the maximum amount of diversity with the maximum amount of repetition. It was almost a philosophy of him. And I would say many times you can see what we try to do at BIG is that we try to create something extraordinary out of ordinary elements. So I think definitely Utzon. And then of course, as soon as I could, I went on a pilgrimage to work for Rem Koolhaas, the Dutch architect. So I went to Rotterdam to apply for first an internship, and then I came back as soon as I graduated from architecture school to work on the design of the Seattle Public Library. And I think one of the things that attracted me to the thinking and work of Rem Koolhaas was this idea of seeing architecture as an integral part of society. That you can say many architects think of their work almost as an autonomous art form, that it is self-referential and it's dogmatic in the sense, you know, some architects will only work with white, or some architects will only work with certain materials. Whereas I think for what I found in Rem Koolhaas was that the projects were always plugged into a specific moment in time, and were somehow informed by the changes in politics, in culture, in technology. And I spent a year and a half of my life working on the design of the Seattle Public Library. And it was kind of interesting because obviously we were designing a library in the hometown of Amazon. And it's hard to imagine, but 20 years ago, Amazon was seen as a bookseller. Today, of course, they sell everything. And I think lately, especially during COVID, I think Amazon has been providing all of us with all our stuff, or Alibaba, obviously. So of course we were designing a library, but we were trying to see what's going to be the future of the library when you have the internet as an infinite source of information, and when you have Amazon as an immediate source of print media straight to your doorstep. So, and I think that thinking I have definitely taken with me, that every time we do a project at big, we try to ask ourselves, how has the world changed, and how is the world changing, and what role can this project play in the transformation and in the manifestation of that transformation in the built environment.
So you said Wuxang and Koolhaas. We know that these two architects, they are always doing the very innovative design. Their design are all very bold. So, and we also know that architecture or in design, we have kind of two parties, that one doing the bold and innovative design, but need the technical innovation to support the design. And the other is doing the safe design with the perfect detailing, but could mostly ensure the delivery of quality. So when you're doing your design project, how could you balance the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways, I mean, I like this idea that in a similar way as what you're describing, I would normally say that you have these two spheres, the kind of very expressive avant-garde and the more conventional corporate consultant. And I think the problem of the avant-garde can be that the designs are too expensive or too difficult. The problem of the corporate consultant could be that it is too conventional and too uninspiring for the people that are going to be living and working there. And we've come up with this idea that we call pragmatic utopia. That and it feels like an oxymoron, like two opposites that don't combine. But by using analysis, rational analysis, and rigor as a tool to power the imagination, we end up in situations where our buildings sometimes you know, they end up looking different because they perform differently. They end up becoming beautiful because they function beautifully. So in that sense, the rational and the expressive, the pragmatic and the utopian become two sides of the same coin.
So when you're doing your design, you are doing the most balanced part. So yes, yeah. So we've talked about some the theory and some interesting things from you, and now let's talk about the project design. So the first one we would like to talk about the twist. This is the very interesting projects that combination of gallery and bridge. So can you share with us the idea of these projects, and also how did the twist form came from?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe you can see my screen now. You're supposed to see a picture of some metallic sculptural bridge spanning over a beautiful river in northern Norway, or like in central Norway, actually. Yeah. So essentially, we were invited to Kistefoss, which is this sculpture park that is located on two sides of a river, and we were asked to suggest where to place the museum, and we came up with this idea that we wanted the museum to be not separate from the sculpture park, but to make it an integral part of the sculpture park. So we came up with this idea that the museum could be the bridge that takes you from one side to the other. And they wanted two kinds of galleries. It's a very small building, it's 1,500 square meters. So they wanted a gallery that could enjoy the view of the surroundings, the beautiful nature, the beautiful water. And they also wanted a gallery that was more for you know, video art, light art, so with no windows and with tall ceilings. So you can, in a way, when you look at this picture, you can see on one hand the artificially lit, and on the other hand the sort of glass pavilion, and the two are connected in the middle with this twist. So here you see how you enter in one side and you exit on the other. And of course, since it has this kind of sculptural quality, the big question is, maybe continuing on what you said before, what is the technical solution? It's actually, even though you see warped surfaces and double curving facades, when you go close, you can see that it's actually made entirely out of identical elements. So it's completely standardized extruded aluminum on the outside. And when you go inside, everything is made out of very simple 2x4 wood sticks. So it's almost like a traditional Norwegian building in the countryside. You can see the lighting, the ventilation, everything is integrated in this kind of very simple structure. So it's literally creating something extraordinary out of a lot of ordinary elements. And here you see how the big panoramic windows become the skylight that finally closes when you get into the artificially lit part. So then beneath you have the bathrooms is the only space that is outside the bridge. It's under the bridge. And you see the beauty of the river running underneath the belly of the bridge.
That is a very smart solution for meet the needs of artificial lighting and also the needs of enjoy the natural lighting. But how can you integrate the surrounding environments with this extraordinary twist form?
No, it's basically because like you have to imagine that it's of course it's hard to see on these pictures, but in the sculpture park there are sculptures by Claes Oldenburg and Olafur Eliasson and Anish Kapoor. So like there's a giant octopus by Yayoi Kusama. So in a way, we're not trying to look like the local architecture. We're trying to make the museum look like one of the sculptures in the sculpture park. And in that sense, you can almost see the building as a hybrid between a museum, a sculpture, and a bridge. So not one or the other, but all three at the same time.
Yeah, so that's a very straightforward and very directly solution for the sculptural park. So I think next, can we talk about the Musée of Piguet, the museum you've done in the Switzerland?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So Audemars Piguet is this watchmaker that for more than 150 years has been located in Vallée du Joux in Switzerland in the Jura Mountains. And it's located in this kind of incredibly beautiful landscape. It's covered in snow 6 months of the year. And it's basically the cradle of watchmaking. And we were asked to do this museum of watchmaking. And the basic idea is they had provided a very elegant program for a kind of linear exhibition where you go through the history and the technical aspects of watchmaking almost chronologically, starting with the history of timekeeping and ending with some of the contemporary masterpieces of Audemars Piguet. So we came up with this idea of taking this kind of linear layout and coiling it up into a double spiral. So here you see the spiral from above. And within this logic, you can always follow the spiral to the inside and out again. But you can always, if you cross in the concentric layers, you can jump in time, go from one part of the story to another. So located, you know, we integrated as part of the landscape. Inside, you can see the historical building to the left and above the skylight. From the inside, you have this illusion of a brass spiral hovering overhead. There are no walls and no columns in the museum. You can say one of the main elements of watchmaking is to make the maximum amount of impact with a minimum amount of material. So what you call complication in watchmaking is the idea of putting as much function in as small a watch as possible. Skeletonization is where you eliminate excess material, and miniaturization is obviously when you make the elements as small and as thin as possible. So you can almost see the architecture as an open work where everything is on display. There are no walls or columns hiding anything. The glass walls are actually carrying the ceiling. It also makes the ceiling feel like a spring, a spiral hovering overhead. And you have this kind of natural view of the surrounding valley. So in many ways, you can say that the spirit of the architecture is very much aligned with the spirit of watchmaking.
Okay, so from the Denmark Pavilion, from Shanghai World Expo to this museum, we could see that you really like to use the structure of Mobius ring. So can you share with us why do you prefer this form? Is this a statement or an idea to break the traditional architecture?
Yeah, like, I mean, maybe first, technically, neither the Shanghai Expo nor the Audemars Piguet Museum is actually a Mobius ring or strip, because a Mobius strip is this kind of magical element where you have a three-dimensional object that has only a single surface, whereas let's say the Shanghai Expo was more of a loop, a single loop, a double loop, making two loops around itself, allowing you to travel inside and outside of it, providing the people visiting the Shanghai Pavilion the experience of riding a bicycle through the city, or in this case, through the pavilion. But of course, the ramping floors and the loop that continues infinitely into itself provided this possibility of describing a streetscape for the visitor. In the case of Audemars Piguet, it's actually a double spiral. So it's a spiral that reaches its own center, and then from there it coils out again. And of course, in the case of Audemars Piguet, it allows the visitor to experience a linear exhibition flow that actually wraps around itself, so that you can always jump ahead or back in time by changing lanes, if you like. So I think that the reason we choose the forms and the geometries we work with is not because of the form or the shape or the symbolism, but rather because of the performance that that particular form provides. The infinite streetscape in Shanghai and the kind of linear narrative that folds around itself to allow for a free jumping between time zones. So in that sense, even if they look related because they use curves, they are actually quite different forms with very different attributes.
So you mentioned that there are some historical buildings surrounded. So how do you integrate this very special form into the historical surroundings?
Yeah, I think the image you see now is maybe a good example. Is that whenever you can see all the neighbor buildings have, you know, like many of them have pitched roofs. The building right next to us, or right behind our building, is the historical building where the workshop started, and it's also part of the museum visit. And the one right to the left is the existing headquarters. So our decision was to make our building part of the landscape, because anything we did that looked more like a traditional building ended up in some kind of strange competition with the two existing buildings. So by making our building part of the landscape, including having the grass of the meadow continue onto the roof, felt like we were somehow part of a different conversation, a conversation that has to do with a bigger landscape, the beautiful nature, the changing of the seasons, and less a conversation with the actual built environment.
So that's a combination with the nature and the surrounding landscape. And
yeah, you can almost see it as a Robert Smithson, you know, a spiral jetty rather than another building.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that there's no columns in the building. So if there's any technical challenge for this building?
I mean, obviously, I have to say that uh, there is a reason why most buildings have columns and walls. It's because they're very easy to work with. But in this case, you can say the art and science of watchmaking is to make the maximum amount of impact with the minimum amount of material. I'm wearing a, maybe if I stop sharing for 1 second, I'm wearing an Audemars Piguet that is an open work. If you, if I take it off, you can sort of see through it. It's all the mechanisms inside is part of the beauty of it. And you can actually see that it's transparent. So in a way, the spectacle of the design of the watch is maybe more all the things that are not there than all the things that are there. So this idea of the open works is that it doesn't hide, it doesn't distinguish between front of house and back of house. It shows everything honestly, and therefore you also have to resolve everything beautifully. It's not just a facade or a kind of cover.
Yeah.
Everything is on display, and I think that that of course makes it more challenging because you can't hide anything. But it also speaks to the principles of watchmaking, that there is no distinction between form and content. There is no distinction between back of house and front of house. Everything is part of the narrative.
Yeah, that's very interesting project. And also, we would like to talk about the 8 house from you, that the most representative project from you. So that project we know is located in the Copenhagen, Denmark, and it is also an Lego-like pixelet landscape form architecture. So can you tell us about how did this architectural form evolve?
Yes, I mean, actually the 8 house was maybe the first big project we started designing after me and my former partner, Sjøen de Smet, decided to close down Plot, and I started big with a handful of my collaborators from the Plot days, and we were also at the same time working on the mountain for the same client, and I think we were like facing the challenge that with the 8 house we were asked to design 500 homes and a significant amount of shops and offices, and we were a little bit concerned about the scale of this project in a Danish context. So we tried to diversify it as much as possible. So we imagined this kind of idea of like looking at different functions and their needs. So for instance, shops and offices have deeper floor plates than homes. So that meant that we could actually, by putting the shops and offices on the ground close to the customers, we could actually create like this kind of path, like a mountain path where you can walk and bicycle from the ground floor to the penthouse. It allows us to create this kind of 3-dimensional community. Here you see these 2 little girls, they are neighbors. They live on the 9th and the 7th floor. So when they want to play with each other, they don't have to get all the way down to the courtyard and back up again. They can just walk down and say hello to each other. This couple that you see here, they live in the 8 house, and their daughter and their son and their husbands and wives and their children all live in the 8 house now. So it's almost like this little village where they can walk down and visit each other. There's a film called Infinite Happiness, where the French-Italian couple Louise Lemoine and Ilabeka has moved into the 8 house for a month, and they're making a diary every day, showing part of life in this community. And as a result of this mountain village feeling, there is an incredible community in the 8 house. Imagine during COVID-19, the lockdown, every night, the people of the 8 house before sunset would go out on their gardens and on the balconies, and then they would sing a song from the Danish songbook, and then they would say goodnight to each other as the sun went down. So imagine the power of more than 1,000 people from more than 500 homes meeting up at a safe social distance every evening, singing together, which is something you never do in a big city, and saying goodnight to each other. So in that sense, you can say the architecture or the architectural intentions that make the 8 house look like a sculpture is also what makes it function as a social condenser. And maybe as a funny side note, we are right now in Holland, in Amsterdam, we are building a kind of 8 house upside down. So this is the courtyard of the 8 house. This is going to be the courtyard of the Sluishuis in Amsterdam. It's basically a city block where the courtyard is a marina. So you can sail your sailboat from the port of Amsterdam into the heart of the city block. So almost like the Dutch cousin or uncle or aunt to the 8 house that is currently under construction.
Wow, that's really a happy life to live in the 8 house. Yeah, to enjoy the village life and also live in the a big city. That's a really happy life. So can you tell us how to ensure the residential function and the density, that we know that these 8 houses already meets the social needs and also could give people a perfect social life. So how to ensure the residential density? Is that means it needs to a larger scale of site?
I mean, I think as an architect, it is also important to know when to stop. Right. So I think what you can do is that there are certain quantifiable elements like daylight, views, access to greenery and nature. For instance, you can see the townhouses, each townhouse has a small garden in front, and the gardens have grown more and more mature over the years. But I think maybe the most important thing is to create spaces where people can meet. In many multifamily housing projects, the only place you can meet your neighbors is in the awkward environment of the elevator. And the elevator is too small a space to be a comfortable social space, and it's too transient because people are getting on and off. So you can't really stop and hang out for 10 minutes and have a conversation. So I think, of course, in the 8 house, you have elevators and you have fire stairs, but you also have the path. You also have the courtyard. You have a whole variety of niches, little spaces of various scales that invite people to stop and say hello and ask how it's going. And by having those connections, you allow for the possibility of social life to prosper and for local community and culture to happen. And I think those are the elements you have to think about when you design spaces for living. In a similar way, the Sluice House has also a series of interconnected terraces, so you can walk around the top, but it also has the marina in the middle as a kind of social focal point. You have a sailing school, you have a brewery, you have a small restaurant and cafe, you have a community center. So there will be a natural flow and a series of meeting points where the people living there will have a chance to get to know each other.
And also, you've proposed the hedonistic sustainability and architectural alchemy. So can you tell us how this case reflect these two theories from you?
Yeah, I think especially architectural alchemy, which is this idea that you can say sometimes when you look at functionalism and rationalism and modernism, sometimes the buildings can be a little boring or predictable, even if on the individual apartment level everything is organized rationally and functionally. It doesn't create something inspiring or inviting. It doesn't speak to your imagination or to your dreams. It just simply works well. And the idea of architectural alchemy, or programmatic alchemy as we also call it, is that by taking these elements like spaces for working, spaces for shopping, spaces for a daycare center, the places for living, and thinking about different kinds of apartment types and putting them together in a strange mixture or in a new mixture, you can create something other and more than the sum of the parts. Almost like alchemy, that by mixing a lot of base metals, at least the dream is that you can create gold, and if not gold, then at least something of extraordinary value. And I think by doing that, you can take a normal city block in Amsterdam and turn it into this incredible space where we invite the life of the city and the life of the port into the heart of the city block. I think a very clear example of hedonistic sustainability might actually be the Copenhagen, this waste to energy power plant that we have recently built in Denmark, that essentially turns waste, household waste, into electricity and district heating. It's right in the center of the city, right next to the marina, and essentially it's so big and so clean that there are no toxins coming out of the chimney. And we thought, how can we celebrate that this is the cleanest waste to energy power plant in the world? And we got the idea to turn the roof into an Alpine Ski Park. In Denmark, we have no mountains, so we have to go to Sweden 6 hours by car to get alpine skiing. And we found out that we could put something 2/3 the size of the nearest ski mountain on the roof of the power plant, and that's essentially what we did. So imagine a mountain where the facades are made out of aluminum planters. It has the tallest climbing wall in the world. You can take the elevator up looking through the insides of the power plant. Here you can see the climbing wall. So inside the climbing wall you have the elevator. So when you take the elevator up, you might look at mountain climbers trying to hang on to the facade. But on the roof, we have planted hundreds of trees and different kinds of vernacular or native species of plants. So if Denmark would have mountains, this is what it would look like. And the entire roof is actually skiable all year. So here you can see a test when we were in the middle of putting out the surface, that you can ski all year, including the summer. Grass grows through the surface. So you can say that the Copenhagen is an example of the fact that a sustainable city is not only better for the environment, it's also better for the lives of the people inhabiting it. That the clean technology inside the power plant is not only better for the air quality of Copenhagen, but it also makes the entire building into one of the most exciting parks of the city.
Yeah, this is a very exciting project, and it is very smart to combine the a ski field with the garage dump. But can you tell us why you designed this form? Is that only because there's need to have a mountain-like building so people could ski on the top of it?
Yeah, like the power plant, like the machinery inside, you can see it on the on this section, is basically the machinery is cascading in height. So you can see on the left you have the administration, the offices. Then you have a series of different elements like scrubbers and filters, and all the way to the right you have the waste bunker where the trash is being dumped. You can see the tipping hall is the lowest part, which is the part where the trucks come in and drop the waste into the waste bunker. So it is this kind of cascading section that in a way informed the idea of a sloping roof. And then of course, once, like normally when you make power plants, you end up trying to make them maybe as boxy as possible, but because we liked the idea of a sloping roof for the skiability, we worked with the engineers to refine and optimize the layout within this idea of a continuous slope.
And we could see that the metal, the aluminum, is the main material for this building. Can you talk about why you chose this material as the main material? If there's any special thinking?
Yeah, like yeah. So you can say that first of all, of course, it's a power plant. It's a very large building. So if you would choose an expensive material, either expensive because of the material, like an expensive metal, or like even steel for that matter, or ceramic, but also something that would be labor intensive, like a brick, or something that would be heavy, like concrete, it would end up costing a fortune. So in a way, the aluminum is the lightest material and the least expensive, and aluminum doesn't deteriorate the way that that steel or wood would. So by creating these mega bricks that are folded aluminum, we minimize the amount of material while retaining a building that has a kind of material attribute. You can see at different times of day the gently kinking aluminum bricks, they reflect the ground, so you have different colors climbing the building. So essentially it's the most materially efficient material we could come up with. And also aluminum is almost 100% recyclable. So since we are dealing with a waste facility, it would be smart to use a material that can also be part of recycling and upcycling.
And this is also a very great idea, that to choose a material that has no color, but can also reflect the surrounding colors. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also can you tell us the best touch point of this project? Like which point is the best touch point, do you think? The highlight, the things you want to highlight.
No, but I think, yeah, so it opened 1 year ago. And of course, it has been a tough opening because it has been closed down because of COVID-19 most of the time. But we're looking forward to getting into the winter season again. But I think the most amazing part is this idea that I like to explain that the Danish word for design is formgiving, that we can give form to that which has not yet been given form. In other words, we can give form to the future, and we can give form to the world we like to find ourselves living in the future. And one thing that is, I think, quite amazing is that now that it's been around for 1 year, it's still kind of incredible that you can go skiing in the middle of Copenhagen, a city that has no mountains, something we have never been able to do. But for instance, my son, he learned to walk 6 months ago, and eventually he'll start learning to ski. And of course, him and his entire generation, they're going to take for granted that, of course, you ski on the power plant, and of course you can climb on the facade. So for them, that's their new normal. And that means that when he grows up and when he starts coming up with crazy ideas for what kind of a city he would like to live in the future, his normal is power plants where you ski on the roof. So imagine what kind of crazy idea him and his entire generation are going to be able to come up with for their future.
And also, can you tell us about the smoke ring?
Exactly.
Part.
Yeah, so sadly, the smoke ring has not been installed yet because there was a change in the board of the power plant. So we haven't gotten the permission to install the smoke ring. But the idea is that you can see the little steam that's coming out of the chimney on the picture in front of you it's water vapor. So essentially steam. So it's made out of the same thing that the clouds are made of. It's a little bit of excess water vapor. So we were thinking, where a chimney normally is the symbol and the manifestation of all of the failures of the technology, it's all of the unfiltered particles, it's all of the unutilized elements, it's all the pollution, it's all of the negatives. In this case, we thought maybe we could change the meaning of a chimney. And we devised a way that instead of letting out a tail of smoke, every time we would have reduced the emission of CO2 with 1 ton, we could celebrate it by puffing a giant ring of steam, or essentially a smoke ring, but made out of water vapor. So that then the chimney would be the symbol of something playful and a celebration of the success of our technology rather than a symbol of the failure of our technology. So in that sense, the smoke rings, if we ever install them, would be the ultimate symbol of hedonistic sustainability. The fact that a sustainable city and a sustainable building is not just good for the environment, it's also more fun for the people inhabiting it.
Yeah, it's really a happy symbol for it. And also, you've mentioned about the future. We know that you have just completed a project, a future city, the first urban incubator projects in the world. That's the Toyota Woven City. So can you tell us something about this project, like why it called Woven City?
Yes. Yeah, so it's this project we've been working on with Toyota, trying to take all of the technologies of the Toyota company and make a prototypical city of the future. And it's interesting because like Toyota, at the end of the 19th century, Toyota was founded as a company making industrial looms, very large machines. And that made them capable of switching to making car engines in the 30s. They made the Prius, the first mass-produced hybrid car, in the 90s, and now they're looking into personal mobility and mobility as a service. So they thought, we need to think about the city differently once cars become autonomous. So we thought, what if the city consists of three kinds of streets? One for electric vehicles, autonomous electric vehicles and pedestrians. One which is more like a promenade for personal mobility, but also a food truck or a pop-up store, like vehicles that have a purpose of going there. And finally, the last could be like a park, only for pedestrians. And then we simply take those three kinds of streets and weave them together in both directions, north, south, east, west. That means that every city block is connected to vehicular access, but also to the promenade and to the park. And this kind of basic principles, we apply it to the whole city. You can in a way say that if you look at the existing city, you have the street, which is dominated by the cars. So by changing that, you say only a third has electric vehicles and pedestrians. The other third is more like a promenade or a plaza. And the last third is like a park. That means that you can walk through the whole city, moving only through a park or strolling only along a promenade. And then of course we are, using modern sources of energy. So the roofs are covered in photovoltaics. The facades are made from cross-laminated timber. Toyota can test the coexistence between pedestrians and vehicles. You have a Matternet. You have fuel cell technology using hydrogen as an energy source. The homes, of course, will have incredible views of Mount Fuji, but will also have domestic robotics, social robots that help cook or bring goods to the home. So you can say it is paradoxical that the woven city designed for an auto manufacturer is actually taking 2/3 of what is currently given over to the cars and giving it back to life, to human life, to animal life, and to plant life, and even to artificial life in the form of the artificially intelligent robots of the city. So, and of course, the woven city is seen as a prototype, but a prototype that can easily be applied to cities as different as, in this case, Barcelona, New York, and Tokyo. And we're scheduled to break ground in the spring next year in Higashi Fuji at the base of Mount Fuji.
And you've mentioned that you divide the block with the 3 different types of streets. And how could you make the fast line, the fast mode road, not interpreted with the other two?
Well, basically, they are woven together, and they are literally at the same level. That's of course also because we looked a lot at some of the studies from the 60s and 70s where you separated cars and people on two levels. And what we have done is that underneath the streets for electric autonomous vehicles, we have the service street, which is where you have sanitation, where you take away all of the waste, and which is also where you deliver all the goods. So in that sense, there is a single layer. So underneath all the buildings, you have of course the basement. Underneath the parks and the promenades, you have soil for the trees and the plants to grow. But underneath the vehicular road, you actually have a service delivery for sanitation and deliveries. So that means that you actually have relatively light traffic happening on the main streets, but that means that from a people perspective, if you work in the woven city, or if you're going to a meeting, or if you're visiting someone, you'll be driving on that vehicular street. And then of course the technology, sophisticated technologies, sensor technology, connectedness is going to resolve the interlace between humans, personal mobility, and mobility as a service.
So if people drive a car to the certain destination, will it cause any inconvenience due to the different street types?
No, the thing is, because every third street is vehicular, you can reach every building block by car or by electric car. But it is so prototypical that it won't be allowed to go there with a normal gasoline car that is driven. So if you come with a conventional gasoline car that has no autonomy, you will have to change to an electric vehicle, an electric autonomous vehicle. So in that sense, but I think that will be true in most cities within the next decade, that you won't be allowed to enter the inner city with a gas guzzling, smoke emitting car. You will simply have to stay away and change to a clean vehicle, and probably also an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, that would be best for our environment. And
For
also
sure.
notice that there's a courtyard inside of the 3x3 block. And so is this can adapt the change of size or scale? Like if there is a live event or something, like they need to change.
Yeah, exactly. So we've made the structure so that out of every 9 blocks, the one in the middle is always a public program. So it can be a park, it can be a square, it can be a community program of some kind. And in certain cases, we've scaled them up to become a major neighborhood park or a major neighborhood square. And the idea is that one of the things we see is that maybe in the future, the fairground or the marketplace is going to come back, because a lot of the traditional programs, like a store, a department store, or a major shop, is being challenged by the Alibabas and Amazons of the world. Online retail is replacing the permanence of these functions. So maybe the idea of a traveling circus or a marketplace that pops up only on Sundays, or so that there's an ever-changing element to the public realm. I think that's probably going to be part of the pop-up store is maybe the store of the future. And in that sense, we need an urban environment that can accommodate that programmatic variation.
Yeah. Oh, and also we have some questions from for your design expression. We know that you have the huge success by doing the architecture. And we know that doing the architecture or doing the design works, you have to transmit the ideas to other people's, no matters to the team members or the client, and even for the local authorities or the construction team. And you are so famous about the transmit your ideas. So can you tell us which aspect do you pay most attention to when present an idea?
I mean, I think maybe one of the most important skills of an architect, I would say, is empathy. To be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, because you are always trying to accommodate the life or the work or the everyday for someone else. So the more you can put yourself in their minds and in their everyday reality, the better you will be able to address their concerns and to realize their dreams. And as such, I think if your design process is driven by this empathy, then when you start communicating your design ideas, you will have a better chance at being heard and understood, because you are already speaking from, you know, on behalf of how you imagine other people living. And of course, empathy is not a magical ability. It's not like we can feel what other people feel, but we can creatively try to imagine what it is like. And therefore, I also think the dialogue you have with end users and with the clients is a way to achieve this shared sensibility that if we imagine something and we are wrong, we will learn that. And together through the dialogue with the client and with the users, we educate each other. We help the users and the client think more like form givers, like architects, and they help us think more like them, like the users of the buildings.
Yeah, that's a very great opinion. And also, we know that the, you know, when we want to express or design ideas, it is not only by some like crazy sketch or some wow renderings. That's not gonna make a great design works. So the very perfect diagram, or to say analysis diagram, is a key to show your design ideas. And you know, lots of people wants to learn the how to show, how to express their design ideas by diagrams from you. So can you share some key points for you know, making the design diagrams to show your design ideas?
Yeah, but I think the purpose of diagramming something is to distill something down to its key components, and focusing on, you can say it's a way of establishing a certain set of priorities where you try to distill for yourself and for the team and for you, the team of collaborators and clients, what are the key criteria, what are the most important things we're trying to achieve, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and to focus only on that aspect. So it's a way of like keeping a certain clarity, because architectural projects often get so complex that it is easy to lose yourself in all of the minute details, and suddenly you forget the big picture. So therefore the diagram is a form of notation device that allows you to keep that overview, keep that clarity, and keep the priorities straight in the middle of the complex process of making a project happen.
Okay, so and also as a young famous designer, do you have any suggestion or any advices to the new generation of designers?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody who is about to graduate or just graduated in architecture is, I think, very fortunate, because I think the next coming decades, the whole world has become interested in physical space again. I think, let's say the last 3 decades, everything has been about online, the cloud, the wireless, and the very small handheld devices. And it's been about, you know, social media, you know, online retail, etc. So it's been this kind of dematerialization. But I think lately, with the Internet of Things, with augmented and virtual reality, with driverless cars, and with sustainability being one of the biggest challenges we have on the planet, suddenly physical space is, you know, the big problem, and therefore also the big solution. So I think it's going to be an incredibly exciting time to be an architect the next few decades. So you're very lucky that you're getting involved right now.
Yeah, so by doing the projects all over the world, do you have any opinion on the different countries and different markets?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, you know, in 2010, we designed the Danish pavilion at the Shanghai Expo. In 2018, we finished the headquarters for the main energy company of Shenzhen. But apart from that, we haven't actually done a lot of work in China until 2020, because paradoxically, over the last year, suddenly our involvement in China has exploded. Last week we announced the Cloud Valley that we're designing with Terminus in Chongqing, and potentially part of many more so-called AI cities across China, and we're currently involved in a lot of major projects in both Shanghai and Shenzhen. So we actually filed to open our office in China this year. So we definitely feel that that there is an interesting kind of moment in China, where, let's say, 10 years ago, it was very much about growth and quantities. And I think even the most patriotic Chinese citizen can see that some of the growth happened a little bit too efficiently and a little bit too fast. And I think what you see now is a very well-informed, very quality conscious approach to architecture and urbanism, where, you know, like Shenzhen has become the city of 1,000 parks. The projects we're doing in Shenzhen and Shanghai all have a very conscious ambition towards sustainability. They have a very sort of strategic master plan for the green corridors of the city, and a sort of very high bar on the quality of the architecture and the urbanism. So I do suspect that the next many years, a lot of very, very interesting contributions to the world of architecture are going to come from China.
And also we have a question from our audience to you. So he said, "Hi Bjarke, I am a big fan. Nice to have you in the online meeting to share your ideas of architecture design." And he wants to ask a question that doing projects in China, because in China architecture design is always detained by regulations and building codes, and turns out to be more normal and traditional. So do you have any similar problems when you are doing projects in China, and any suggestions for it?
I mean, I think the good news and the bad news is that you have a lot of regulation everywhere. So I think architecture by definition is a very ruled art form. And I think in that sense, the art and science of design is really to find ways to understand the rules and work with the rules, so you start making the rules work for you, rather than you know, rather than doing just what the rules tell you to do, to understand them and get intimate with them, so that they can actually start working on your behalf. And in that sense, it's like, if you ignore the rules, they will hit you like a roadblock. But if you start by digesting the rules, the parameters, the criteria, you can turn them into the driving force of your design. It's a bit like in martial arts, you know, like in Kung Fu or Aikido, that you have to turn the force of your enemy into your own strength. That the better you understand the rules, the more you can make them part of your strength than submitting to them or being a victim of them.